what's up everybody? Welcome back to Simple C10, and on today's episode, we're going to get started on our 1966 Chevrolet C10 named Lucky. Alright, here it is, ladies and gentlemen. This is Lucky. This is a 1966 Chevrolet C10 fleet side. This is a 350 truck. Another thing that I really liked about this truck is the interior has already been painted, and it's really slick paint too. It looks really good. I'm gonna have to flip that steering wheel around right there. One of the things that I usually don't go for on these trucks is a metal bed. So this truck does have the metal bed in it, but I'm thinking maybe just cut this right where the notch would go and leaving the front and back, and then when I raise the bed floor it could be storage or something like that. You can see here it's a 350 truck. Nothing fancy about it. It's got a couple little upgrades on it, but a lot of stuff that's gonna have to go or get refreshed. We're about to pull Francis out and get Lucky in here and get started on this thing. Let's get started on this build. So the first thing that I always do is install disc brakes and drop spindles. But on Lucky, this truck already had disc brakes and drop spindles, so all I had to do was clean up the front a little bit. I took the spindles off in preparation for the front do-it-yourself slam kit, but I cleaned up the frame with a wire wheel here, did it the hard way. Next was installing power steering on this truck, so I had to take off the gearbox and then install all the power steering components. But after I cleaned up my mess here, then it was time to get started on the upper bag bracket. So this is the kit that I have on the website, the front do-it-yourself slam kit, the upper bag bracket. You just drill the holes and mount it up top. I wanted to go ahead and get those holes drilled before I cleaned up the frame here. I used some of the Sweet Patina cleaning products, the degreaser, and then the blackout paint on the frame. And once all of that was dried, I got the bags prepped and ready to install the bags on the front of the truck, put the fittings on there, bolted them onto these custom made upper bag brackets. They say Lucky on those. Shout out to Walter from VelaWorks for hooking me up with those. Once I installed those on the cross member, it was time to install the Porterbuilt control arms. So on this specific build, I went with the Ford only control arms because I'm using factory inner fenders, and on a 5.5 inch back spacing, all I wanted to do was move the control arm forward an inch, that way it centers my wheel, but I didn't want to do narrowed because I would get into the factory inner fender. Before finishing up the front air ride in preparation for cutting out my inner fender, I installed simple shocks on the front. So whenever you cut out your factory inner fender, you're going to lose the hood spring there. So you have to replace those springs with the simple shock. It's an easy bolt-in setup. Then I could use my simple guide to trace and make a perfect cut to give me the tire clearance that I need to ride low. But instead of just leaving a hole in the inner fender, I use these GMSS inner fender covers, and they work great. This is such an easy upgrade. They bolt in, they hide the hole, they keep your engine bay clean so you don't have to worry about slinging junk and dirtying up your clean engine. I went ahead and finished that off with some of the front core support covers to finish that look, and man, it turned out awesome. I love it. The simple shocks with the inner fender covers and the core support covers really make the front of this truck look nice. And later on we'll install some more engine bay items to really clean up the engine bay. But this is what I needed to do to finalize the front air ride in the truck. That way I could lower the truck down. I've got tire clearance, I've got the holes in the fenders, the hood shocks. I'm ready to then move to the back of this truck. To bag the back of these C10s, you first got to remove the trailing arms, your brakes, the rear end, and get everything out of the way. And I always start with the trailing arm cross member first. This is the TenWorks trailing arm cross member that I have available on the site. It's my favorite design of all the designs. You can see it's a topless design, which means it gives you drive shaft clearance, you have exhaust clearance, and also ground clearance on the bottom. So this is a simple bolt-in setup. You just bolt in the 2 C channels on the side and then bolt it in and you're good to go. Next step was welding in the step notch. So I had to take off the bump stop bracket, the 2 center cross members, and then I just mocked up the C notch to get it ready to measure the upper and the lower cap. Then I cut those to size and then tacked everything in and made sure it lined up. If you're new to the channel and you're not sure how to weld in a step notch, I have step-by-step videos on how to install all the step notch and everything else that you see on this video. On the Lucky build, I kept the 12-bolt rear end, which I normally do, and I just sanded it down and then used a wire wheel, cleaned it up, sprayed it down with some of the Rust Restore and the Rust-Oleum truck bed coating. After that, I secured the 2 notches together by using my simple bridge. There's a lot of different ways to do bridges, but I designed this specifically for those that are using the Watts link to have backside clearance for your Watts link. Next was some of the TenWorks trailing arms, and I love this design because they're adjustable, so you can adjust them forward and back, and also they have an 1.5 inch drop built into the actual trailing arm. They have a bracket for your parking brake, and then also a mount for your panhard bar and your airbag. To get the rear end to tuck fully on trailing arms, you need a rear do-it-yourself slam kit. And I'm cutting down these blocks here because I've already got an 1.5 inch drop built into the TenWorks trailing arms. So I'm gonna throw the trailing arms on there, bolt in the rear do-it-yourself slam kit, and then it's time to mount in the rear bags. To achieve the maximum drop on the back of these trucks, you'll need to mount the bag directly to the frame in the back. So I've created a rear bag template that allows you to know exactly where to drill your holes to mount that bag to the upper frame. You just bolt the bag directly to the frame, bolt it to the bottom of the trailing arm, and you are good to go. And this is going to get us about 1 inch off the ground level with the front on a stock cross member. To keep the rear end centered during all ride travel, I installed a simple C10 Watts link. All you're going to do is weld in the middle bracket and then find mid-travel, get your bars parallel, and then weld in your side brackets. It's that easy. And once you have the Watts link installed, you can install the rear shock relocation kit. And all you have to do is weld in a couple brackets, and then you have your shocks relocated. If you're going to install a fuel tank in the back of your truck, you'll want to also relocate the rear frame cross member. As you see here, I used a Tanks Inc. tank on here. It's from Holley. I just dropped it into the top of the frame, made some mounting brackets, and then installed the Holley fuel filter regulator. And if you have an EFI system, you'll need a fuel filter regulator. This is going to regulate your fuel pressure. I have an in-tank pump, but I ran my own lines from Evil Energy. I bought a lot of their AN fitting lines. And then with the fuel filter regulator, it's a returnless system. Now it's time for the fun stuff. We've got the simple C10 air ride kit that comes with the airlift 3-piece system, the 5-gallon tank, the 2 X series compressors, all your fittings, everything that you're gonna need to install air ride onto your truck. So I love when it comes time to install the airlift 3P because then I get to get creative. I used one of the relocation kind of brackets here, and on the video, if you go back and watch on the airlift 3P video, I will show you how to install your water traps, how to do all your fittings, and install a leak-free system on the back of your C10. If you're new to air ride and the wiring and the air lines and everything intimidates you, I want to encourage you, don't let it. This airlift 3-piece system on the simple C10 air ride kit makes everything so easy to install. You plug in 5 air lines, you hook up your 2 power and negatives to the battery to plug into the compressor, and run 1 wire into your cab for a keyed ignition. And it's that easy, and you can start to have air ride on your truck. I've got all this on videos, step by step how to install it, so just go back and watch those videos. After I got the air ride hooked up, it was time to start on the bedwood. So I did something different. I took a cue from Jason Venata from Venata Fabrication. he had done a plywood bed. So I reached out to a buddy and got some Akume plywood, which is a marine grade plywood. And I built a structure here to have a tilt bed made out of this plywood. He CNC'd the center sections, or you could route those. I found some of these tilt bed hinges on Facebook Marketplace, and these come from LS Fabrications. I use their tilt bed brackets and also their actuators later on, but I mounted these up to a custom bracket that I had made from Send Cut Send that mounted the plywood to the actual tilt bed bracket. This was the hardest part about it, was aligning the center section and making sure that the tilt bed hinges worked correctly. I welded in an inner frame structure to hold the wood and left the middle section open where the tilt bed would be. I used a Kona stain from Varathane and coated the whole boards there. I had to cut out the holes for the tubs with the jigsaw and then coated those. And I went ahead and installed the stainless strips onto the wood before we mocked it up to see if it was going to fit. And this was probably the most stressful part of it, is putting this bracket on there, mounting it up correctly. With some help from Zach from RS Restorations, I was able to get this mounted up. And if you remember, this was the night before Southeastern Truck National, so we were trying to wrap this thing up, and that's kind of how car shows go. I finished up the raised bed floor with some of these rear tubs made by Tin Man Fab, and he designed these specifically for people that are following my videos, and these worked out perfect. They really finished off the look, and I was so happy with how it turned out. The next thing I focused on was the small block Chevy. So I went back and forth whether I wanted to install the LS or a small block, and ultimately decided to keep the small block. So I pulled it apart, and while I had the engine out, went ahead and cleaned up the engine bay and the inner fenders. I used the Rust-Oleum Rust Restore first as a base coat, and then went back with some Rust-Oleum satin paint. I just wanted to have some kind of base coat. A lot of this was going to get covered by the GMSS inner fenders later on. I had Zach at RS Restorations. He painted the block really nice and installed a cam on there. Then when we dropped the engine into the truck, I started to install some of the Holley parts, the valve covers, the Holley Sniper sheet metal intake, as you see here. It turned out really nice. And then I focused on the Holley mid-mount front drive. A lot of you guys that have followed me know that I use and love this Holley mid-mount front drive because it gives you AC, your power steering, the water pump, an upgraded alternator, and it's all compact, and it just looks really good. It's pricey, but it gives you a lot of the things that you would have to buy later on anyway. To cool the engine, I used a cold case radiator, so this was designed specifically for the 63 to 66 trucks. It came with a fan shroud and the fan with it. I did mock up my own side brackets to lose the upper radiator bracket. I just used the factory mounting holes and some rib nuts into the actual radiator and bolted that in. On this truck, I decided to use the Holley Sniper 2 EFI. And I've used Holley Snipers before on some of my past builds and have had really good luck with them. So I decided to use the Sniper 2 to give it a try. And I really like the aesthetics of it. It just looks really good. This is a very straightforward install. There's not much to it. They have great instructions. With the Holley Sniper 2, though, it does come with a PCM that you can plug everything into, which made the wiring of this a lot easier than the past systems. Behind the 350, I'm putting a 700 R4 that was built by Shiftworks, here a local company, and it requires a kick-down cable on this transmission. So it mounts to the back side of the Holley Sniper, and it will have connections to run the transmission. All we had left to fire this truck up was to install the exhaust. So I hit up my boy Zach from RS Restorations, and I got some Flowmaster Series 40. We're going old school with this thing. So Zach helps me with all the exhaust for these trucks. On a small block, we'll typically use the block hugger headers, and that will allow us to kick the exhaust out between the control arm and the outside of the frame. We'll kick it out there and run the exhaust all the way down the outside of the frame to a turn down right in front of the rear tires. It came time to start this up. We also had to break the truck in. It was a fresh rebuild, so I had to rev up the truck and leave it at high RPMs for quite a while to break the cam in, to break the engine in. But also this was the first time that the engine had been started or the sniper had been installed. So there was a lot going on the first time the fuel pump had kicked on. So this was D-Day. This was the time, the test. So we didn't know what was going to happen.
I'm going to check the time.
So don't buy those headers. These were just some cheapos off of Amazon. They looked really good, but trash. So after we got the burnout headers off of there and replaced them with some stainless ones, then I moved on to finishing up the engine bay. And the first thing that I did was install some of these GMSS inner fender panels. And what these are going to do is cover all your factory panels. Fender, make sure to slam it up against everything along the way and scrape the nice powder coating off. That's a pro tip there. The small block, cleaning up all the wires. I put all the wiring for the cool pack distributor all on the back side of the engine. But this is going to help cover all these holes. So on this one, I'm just going to play around with it for a second. This is awesome because I just had a bunch of holes in the firewall right there, and then now it's just slick. It's shaved. I mean, shaved, quote unquote. It's just a panel that's covering it up. Now that the suspension is complete and the engine bay, it's time to focus on the interior. So I pulled out the nice Snowden seat right here with the green houndstooth that turned out awesome. And I'm going to focus on installing new carpet. So the carpet in this truck was decent, but it wasn't up to kind of the standards I've wanted this truck. So I pulled it out, and underneath the old carpet was just a ton of this deadening material. So I had to scrape all that old stuff off. Then I removed the rear fuel tank brackets. That way I could install the sound system that's coming up soon. Once I got the brackets cut all off there, I used some Noico sound deadening material and coated the whole backside and the floor with the material. I got some kick panels from A2 Metal Fab, and installed onto the kick panels, but first I had to block off the actual vents on the side. And once I had that done, I could install the new carpet that I got from stockinteriors.com. That's usually who I always get my carpet from.
Woo!
But as I'm installing this, the hardest part of
That
installing
melted.
carpet is to know where to cut the
Nice.
holes to mount your seat and your seat belts. I saw my friend Zach using a soldering iron to do his holes in the carpet. So I decided to use it. I bought a Milwaukee soldering iron, and what I found out is you can fill under the carpet where the hole is and then push the soldering iron straight through the carpet, and it melts the edges of the carpet so it doesn't fray, and it works perfectly. I've used it multiple times since I found out this trick, and I encourage you next time you install carpet to use a soldering iron. I've got one tip that's specifically for carpet and the other tip for solder. So this is the first truck that I've installed a sound system on of this magnitude, and it's from Slosh Subs made by AIC Audio. They design these sub boxes to fit your specific year model. They have them for all different types of C10s, and it's just going to install in the back of your cab and you're going to bolt it in. But first, you'll want to choose some audio equipment. I went all with JL audio. I've always wanted JL since high school, so I got a couple of 10s from JL's. They're the shallow mounts, and then also a JL amplifier. And I have all this information on the full video if you want to go check it out. But I installed the amp with the subs, mounted the box into the floor, and then that was pretty much it. The front enclosure part is magnetic, so it will hide all the things, which I really like. I told them that I wanted a awesome, simple setup for the subs, but it sounds amazing. I ran my wires really nicely with some wire loom and wire clamps all around, and then ran this all the way up to the battery. The JL equipment that I used on this build is on the more expensive side, but I wanted to be able to compare some of the cheaper audio systems, which I've had in the past, to something that's more expensive in the JL stuff. So you'll see I use the JL Audio Bluetooth amplifier. So this is going to plug in and it actually connects to my phone. I don't have a radio in this truck. All this does is run directly from my phone. After I installed the subs, then I put in the kick panels and also installed some JL 6.5 kick panel speakers as well. To upgrade the lighting on this truck, I went with some of the Schindel & Sons LED turn signals and brake lights. So these just simply wire into your factory wiring harness, and they allow you to have a turn on sequence and then a turn sequence. And you can get these in a lot of different colors. I went with the actual orange with orange, so it looks like factory, but it has a really cool effect. And these just mount in just like the factory ones do with a couple of bolts. To finish off the interior, I did upgrade my gauges to Dakota Digital, and these are the RTX series. And what I love about those is they look like the factory gauges, but they give you all the benefits of digital. You can change all the colors and all that, but all your different gauge meters will plug in easily to a PCM, so you can easily change that. And you just can't go wrong with these Dakota Digital RTX. They're a little bit more expensive than the VHX, but they're totally worth it. So if you're watching this, if you want to get a factory style gauge cluster that works great and is just top of the line, Dakota Digital RTX is the way to go. This is where I get a little bit crazy. I'm installing trim on this truck, and guess what? I'm drilling a bunch of holes in the side of this truck, and people went crazy over it. They thought it was already painted, even though the paint was kind of nice on it. It was flaking under the hood. And after this, about 2 weeks after I drilled all these holes and tested the actual trim, that's when it went over to Taylor's Colors in Eagleville, Tennessee. Dell and his team over there did a great job. They stripped this truck down to basically bare metal and fixed every dent on it, and just look how nice it looks. They did a killer job. This is definitely what took this truck to the next level. I've never had a paint job to this extreme, and I'm so happy that I made this decision. And if you're looking for a SEMA quality paint job, if you want something to be proud of that you can take and really show off, then Dale and his team at Taylor's Colors is definitely where I would go. He's a great guy. Whenever I got this truck back from Taylor's Colors, I was excited to put one of these new Simple C10 billet badges on here. These are from a company called Billet Badges, and they will custom make any kind of billet emblem that you want. They work with a lot of top end companies out there, and I love how it looks on the back of this truck. The fun doesn't stop after paint. Whenever I got the truck back, I realized I didn't really like the location of the air ride management. It was hard to get to, so I designed my own on a piece of wood and reached out and got one of these nice tanks called a square tank. And I mounted everything to this wood, drilled all the holes, got some bulkhead fittings from Evolve AVS Online, and I have a whole video explaining step by step how I did this air management system. While I had everything apart, I went ahead and re-cleared my board satin instead of gloss. And I really feel like it made a huge difference with the look of the wood and the sheen. For this to be plywood, I think it turned out amazing. I really love the bedwood and the air ride setup and how the tubs turned out, and also these actuators. Check this out. So here it is all tucked in there. You can see kind of the trim piece that really makes it look nice. All the bulkheads. So far, that's where we're at with the Lucky build. I'm sure there's more to come in the future. Just want to remind everybody, all the parts that I mentioned on this video, I have available on the website, simpleC10.co. I really appreciate you guys watching the videos, all the support. Let me know your favorite thing and your least favorite thing about this build and what you would like to see in the future builds on Simple C10.